Welcome to Humanity Rising. I'm Tom Eddington. Jim Garrison's away this week. We're delighted to welcome you to day 5 on our conversations this week on the future of God. I'd like to welcome my colleague and good friend, Michael Putz. Michael, welcome, and excited to get into this conversation today on our continuation of the series on the future of God. So welcome, and looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Tom. This has been a great week, and the dialogues have been really fruitful, and I really like how it's unfolding. And I'm really excited for today's session. I think it's going to be a great capstone for the week, a great way of culminating the experiences and hearing from what this experience has been like in the trenches for people who have been doing this for decades. Who's been doing it through their own personal path, but more importantly, through service and interacting with many people in the United States and around the world across many faiths. And so this is a great opportunity to hear not only a rich amount of experience, but an experience that goes across different traditions, different cultures, and different faiths, and as an integral whole of this journey to find a way of making meaning, a shared sense of meaning that is not only fulfilling and wholesome for us individually, but makes us more effective in our outreach to other people in the world, in our service, in how we are in community, and how we are in the world. And I think it's very important to see that, as they say, by the fruits you shall be known. And we can to judge the path, we can see the effectiveness of something by how the fruits it shows. And I think you're going to see the fruits of two remarkable people's journey in faith, working across multiple faiths, and making an impact, a very practical impact in the world. So I'm very excited today to be able to have a dialogue with Bob and Gloria Gardner Rees, wonderful people here. I hope they'll join in the session here, that Jim Garrison introduced me to, and it's been a real pleasure to learn about their journey, learn about their work, and to have the opportunity to facilitate a session with them where they can share what they've learned, and maybe we can learn some lessons from them, from their experience. I want to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to this wonderful session, Bob and Gloria. Thank you.
And Michael, before we get into the conversation, I just want to send a big shout out and thank you to you for the framing of this week. When we think about the future of God, in the context of, as you've so aptly put it, where humanity's dealing with a meta crisis, and as a result, we're dealing with a meaning crisis. And the framing that you've shared this week of the future of God is developmental, participatory, and relational. And I think it's a beautiful framework for how we think about the future of God. And so I just want to call that out in particular, and thank you for that framing, and looking forward to this conversation with you, Bob. And Gloria, if you'd like to join us on video and take yourself off mute, I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for that. And I just was thinking, we've been in this we've been doing it for 5 days. I didn't think about reminding people who may not have who just joined to see Bob and Gloria today about that framing of, it's really critical. And I think what you're going to see through the work that they've done in the world and the work they've done themselves is, it's developmental, it's relational, it's participatory, and that's the core of the future of God. If there is a future of God, that's the future of God. And I think you'll hear some real great pioneers today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and all of you who are part of this dynamic and vibrant community. This opportunity to talk about God is really a beautiful opportunity. They say that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And in a way, that's true. But in my experience, God keeps changing. And that's really good news. To paraphrase Christian Wyman, if the God you believe in at 50 is the same one you believed in when you were 15, then something's wrong. Just something about myself. I grew up in a godless world. one filled with poverty, fractured families, violence, addiction, insecurity, uncertainty, abandonment, and abuse. I didn't really know anything about God in that first decade. I only remember one prayer my mother taught me. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, which was a little bit scary to a kid, I pray the Lord my soul to take, but I had no confidence of a soul or of a God taking it. I first really learned about God when my father returned from the Second World War and rescued me from a foster home where my brother and I had been placed when our mother abandoned us. My father, who had seen a lot of terrible things in the war, taught me that God loved me. And because I loved my father and his love, I began to understand and feel God's love, and that changed my life. Over the decades, God has shifted and expanded his focus from my being that child to my being a good husband, a good father, a good teacher, a good learner, a good neighbor, a good friend, a good disciple, just a good person. He's been patient with me as I have learned about him, and in that process, learned about myself as well. One of the most important things to acknowledge is how little I know, but yet how precious that knowing is. I think we need to be open to learning about God from every possible source. But I also think that we should be cautious about those who claim, as they open their sacred texts, tell us what they, to claim that everything we need to know about God is found not only within the pages of that text, but in their interpretation of those pages. It reminds me of God's to the people. In the Book of Mormon, the Book of Mormon quotes people as saying, a Bible, we've got a Bible, there can't be any more Bible. To which God says, don't you know that there are more nations than one? Don't you know that I, the Lord your God, have created all men and women? And that I remember those who are upon the isles of the sea, that I rule in the heavens above and in the earth beneath, that I bring the nations together, and that the testimony of the nations is a witness unto you that I am God, that I remember one nation like unto another. Wherefore I speak the same words unto one nation like unto another, and when the two nations come together, the testimony of the two nations shall come together also. Yes, we can find God in all of the sacred books and in all of the sacred traditions of the world, which is why Gloria and I love the interfaith and multi-faith work that we're so eagerly and passionately engaged in. I loved teaching Mormonism at Graduate Theological Union and at UC Berkeley because it gave me such a rich opportunity to learn from other believers. And that richness grows daily. Gloria?
Well, I think about the cross-pollination that there is between all these different cultures and religions, and that's what I've reveled in my life. I'll talk about my young life later, but let me talk about travel that I have done has been after raising 6 children and divorcing, and Bob and I have been together for 6 years, and it's been really incredible that our loves and our experiences intertwine and thread into each other, and we cross-pollinate from what we know also. But I find that there are germs, seed germs from various religions or from many truths that I know that seem to have a different vibration of response in different countries and in different perspectives. in interfaith work here in Marin, I've listened to Ask Me Anything. We have put this program on once a month that a faith will come and you can ask anything to learn of it. And some of the things that I value that are godly come out, like light. Light comes from the Quakers, the Religious Society of Friends, and they live from a divine center. And they find simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and then that silence where the light grows. Gnosis, knowing things, but for them, it's not doctrine that you know, it's their testimony, that inner light that comes out for them. And with the Unitarian Universalists, they are really passionate about community democracy, and transcendentalism came out of there. So this idea of unity and oneness and wholeness that has been emphasized so much by Michael. And then the nature of reality, discovering who one really is, comes out of Buddhism for me. And then the Wiccan religion is very strong on creation and on the divine feminine and harmony with creation, and nature oriented, and a pagan aspect of it too. And then that stillness and interconnection. And the Baha'is find growth and transformation and nobility and everything. God is beyond our understanding, according to the Baha'is, but divine love touches everything. And the purpose of religion is to help populations take charge of their own spiritual, social, and economic development, and to bring about betterment in this world. And I see this in people who have come to understand awe. It doesn't have to be religion. It's when they see something guiding and transcending. And when I was in China, I was there for a year teaching English as a second language, and I realized that they were in a womb, and I learned from them that communal living, even though it was more rote than maybe other communities, it was alive, and they were outdoors cooking at night and singing and playing games with their children. And I was in India teaching also for 4 months, and I saw a graciousness to their living and a way of coping with arranged marriage. And I was teaching nurses there who wanted to come to the US. In the Philippines, the women there told me, don't feel sorry for us because of our poverty. Is because if we excel educationally, no man will marry us. And so, all of these things open up to me a sense of community with them. And in Guatemala, there's this passion and there's color. And my students in the US have wondered, where's all the color, and why are the streets dead at night? And in Madagascar, I learned that there's a great deal of variety, and that they have a boldness to their believing. And anyway, I'll leave it there of what beauty has and development has come to me through being able to mix with these other ways of seeing. Bob?
Thank you, Gloria. One of the ways in which we learn about God is through the amazing variety of God's gifts that we discover as we look into the world, as we Gerard Manley Hopkins says the world is filled with the glory of God. It is charged with the glory of God, and it is in looking for that glory and in finding it that I believe that that we begin to find God. Gerard, or the poet, President Jeffers, said this: "We know that the enormous and vulnerable beauty of things is the face of God. Look how beautiful are all of the things that he does. His signature is the beauty of things." But God is also found in the things that they inspire us to create. That is the magnificent variety of art and poetry, of drama and music. Reminds me, once at Easter, while we were in our home in Los Angeles listening to Bach's magnificent Mass in B minor, I get goosebumps just saying those words. A neighbor wandered through an open door and sat quietly through the recording. After the last strains of the Nona Mobis Pacem were there in that space, we were all quiet. And then he said, "I don't believe in God, but if I did, this is what he would sound like." We know that through the beauty of God is also found in the beauty and innocence of children. When I worked at the Institute of Heart Math in the Santa Cruz Mountains, I loved to talk to children about God and about their hearts. One of the most cogent observations came from a first grader named Mallory, who said, "If no one had a heart, God would not be alive, because God has a heart." Another profound sentiment came from another first grader, Gadian, who said, "God would have no reason to live if we didn't have hearts." This reminds me of the Midrash, which says, "Well, God's face is above, his heart is below." And it is in his heart and our hearts, I believe, that we have this unspeakable communication of who we are and who God is. That is, God has given us hearts and minds by which we can search and to know him or to know them, which is why I distrust four kinds of people: those who only think and those who never think, those who only feel and those who never feel. It is in thinking and feeling, it is in using the full capacity of our ability to make sense of the world and to find meaning that I believe that we are able, in using those, all of that of who we are, to find God. Gloria?
Yeah, so speaking of children, I'll tell about my childhood. I was a very loved child, quite the opposite of Bob, and it was a happy, happy time. But one time, as a 10-year-old, I was I did a lot of swimming, and I was in a water ballet show for a country club, and I came home from performing. My father brought me home, which surprised me because he would like to be there getting the fireworks ready, but I got home and mother was bedridden. Turns out she was very ill with polio. It had come on quickly. I had a 6-month-old brother that I then began bathing and feeding, and 6 children in the family, and I was second, the oldest daughter, and so there were a lot of duties that came upon me, and so that was July 4th. July 8th is when I turned 11, and I remember sitting at the top of our indoor stairs there and thinking about my family, my situation, my little brother. And it was one of those states of mind that we've heard of through the week, where it was an overpowering moment when I thought, I am a woman. I guess turning 11 means you're a woman. And I have handled this responsibility, and I can willingly move on. I don't have to be a child anymore. But I was very grateful and recognized my past. So that was in July. September, one morning, my mother, this is 2.5 months later, cried out to me, call the doctor, call the doctor. It's 5:30 in the morning. And I go in and I see my mother doing an arm lift, my father's flat on the floor and she's trying to get him to breathe. It's before the mouth to mouth was thought of, really. He did not survive. And here, my grandmother came to the home. This is still 6 o'clock in the morning and she said, oh, Barbara, do you remember when you were on your deathbed so ill? And I came to the door and a voice in my head said, one of them must go. And I said, dear Lord, don't let it be Barbara. The children need a mother. And I remember that I held an odd trust in God through that statement, somehow that there was purpose to something, and I couldn't understand what it would be. And my thoughts of that have shifted, just like God changes for Bobby, it changes for me too, and God does. But my mother spent a lot of her time in bed during that time, and had mostly overcome the ills of polio by the time my father died. But I do know that I didn't feel on the same wavelength with the rest of my peers in school and so forth. I found a lot of resonance in just being alone, and well, not alone so much. I could be inside myself with my friends. I was social, but I grew up that way. And then I was at the University of Utah I was on the diving team, and the coach showed a lot of interest in me, and I wanted to talk to her, and I kind of like, I've got this thing I really want to talk to you about. And we got into her office and I said, can you tell me what is reality? And that's she was a little nonplussed about that, but it was something I was trying to figure out, because I didn't have, mother was still distant for me in a lot of ways. She was also extremely gifted at caring, and was a professional musician and started up a business. And she did a lot of real estate besides that. And the business was magnificent, with restoration of antique lighting, and she figured out mathematically how to make lampshades. But my mother was very involved. But so then after this marriage I had, and we lived in Alaska for 5 years and 6 children, and the divorce was a very courageous thing. It was not anything pushed upon me, but I couldn't find people in church that understood my sense of religion the way I did. And I remember a couple of incidents that I decided just to stay away so that I could keep my faith. And then I learned about a China teachers program through the David Kennedy Center for international studies at BYU, and I went there, and so after China and after India, and then I became very interested in Sufism, and did some sacred dancing with that, and then my understanding of it, of religion, of God, it was there, but it wasn't till I met John Kessler. I had already met him. My brother and his sister had dated earlier, but he was doing something with meditation that I went to, and I recognized that he had an understanding of the higher reaches of Mormonism, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that reached above what I was getting in church. And I know that Ken Wilber was very taken with John, and he wrote, "There is nobody doing more leading edge work on the integration of Eastern and Western approaches to consciousness and growth than John Kessler." And I maybe will explain a little bit more of that after Bob talks about something else, so that I don't monopolize here.
Thank you, Gloria. One of the things that's evident to me is that people who love God love light and reflect that light. So one of the things that I have learned is that God is light, as Paul wrote to the Corinthians. For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, hath shined in our hearts to give the light of knowledge on the glory of God. I believe we are all born into this world, not only, as Wordsworth says, trailing clouds of glory, but also filled with light and with the capacity to magnify that light. As modern scripture says, that which is of God is light, and he that receives light and continues in God receives more light, and that light grows brighter and brighter until the perfect day. That is, we are beings of light. In Latter-day Saint scripture, we learn that we are all born with something which is called the light of Christ. Every person who comes into this world comes in with light and has the capacity to have that light grow and expand. The 16th century Kabbalist Isaac Luria taught that when God created the world, he sought to light it by shaping special lamps or vessels to hold his light. Luria explains, but as God poured the light into the vessels, catastrophically they shattered, tumbling down toward the realm of matter, that is, to the earth. And thus our world consists of countless shards of the original vessels, entrapping sparks of the divine light. Humanity's great task, that is, our task, involves helping God by freeing and uniting the scattered light that is in everything and in us, raising those sparks back to divinity and restoring the broken world. Many Jews believe it is their duty to participate in the repair and redemption of the world. Tikkun olam means that we have this joint responsibility to free and unite the scattered light. In some traditions, this is seen as the shared and sacred work of God and humans, that we, as beings of light, hoping to bring that light into our own hearts and minds, helping to unite it in others, and learning and taking and being magnified by the light of God and the light in the world, which is everywhere, and the light in all of us. Back to you, Gloria.
Well, speaking of light, that's one of the three major words that come out of John's work with integral polarity practice, IPP, he calls it. Love, well, life and love and light. And I want to read you Terry O'Fallon, who does the stages of adult development, said John Kessler's IPP practice is the only practice that I'm aware of which draws on the spiritual understanding and depth obtained through the spiritual traditions, as well as the latest research on the full range of human development, and systematically takes seekers through a developmental sequence which intertwines growing up and waking up as one path. And I've worked with Terry, I've worked with John, I've been working with John and his work for not quite 2 decades now. And a woman named Kate Holbrook said, truth isn't something known so much as something we do and live and bring to pass. And that's what I find in John's work, is that it's a practice. It's a way of developing this sense. I think wonder is a more studied way of coming into enlightenment, but awe is when it hits you and you're not expecting it. We can intuitively know truth, but I think it's something we do and that we live into and we grow into and that we bring about through who we are. As a scholar at Harvard now, Zach Davis talked about divided mind, and he said, he talked about, I'm talking about a polarity here of 2 different ideas of the mind. We have valued that, what we used to call the left brain, but we realize that they have to have each other, and that's what polarities do, is they have to have each other. But it's that logical, analytical self that looks at details and parts and completions and has knowledge in abstract parts and can decontextualize everything and has efficiency and utility and technical control and is also competitive and things like that. We've valued that over the heart that Bob has done so much work with, and it's certainly been a huge part of my awareness. And that intuitive and that creative, holistic, that imaginative part of us with wisdom and wholeness to it. It's the heart that finds meaning and connection and beauty, and that develops into a holiness and deep longings and collaborations with people. That's what Zach is saying is the master of the 2, that we also have to integrate, because either one of them alone is not good. And that's the kind of thing that John has looked at with these different polarities, things like focus and openness and alignment and deviation and construction and deconstruction that Michael is talking about. But they have to have each other, and they have to. So his work is to hold these contrary truths in their natural tensions, and they grow conceptually. I mean, we can inhabit one or the other, and John does a voice dialogue to bring us out into this meditative state, that we start seeing the reciprocity that comes between them, and then finally the interpenetration, where they become that one, and it forms a portal that lets us go up through and transcend, and yet we include all that we have had. I would like to read to you part of Oliver Wendell Holmes to talk about this. So this is a nautilus shell. This is a fossilized one that has been cut open. And you see, either way you look at it, you see all those chambers. It's an ancient pattern and it's sacred geometry. It's also called the Fibonacci sequence of growth, that there's a perfect balance and a harmony where each number of that growth is the sum of the previous two on into infinity. That's the Fibonacci. And Oliver Wendell Holmes spoke about this. And this, what I do want to say before I read this poem is that these polarities that we have come in at a very concrete level as a child, and then they go into a more subtle, which is intuitive and mental. And then in that third stage, it becomes more cosmic. And that's when we start to comprehend who God is. It's like Henri Corbin, who talked about the imaginal world where the heavens come and they meet the earth, and that's where there's communion. That's that causal state or meta-aware, whatever you want to call it, where and after that we go into the non-dual that is so important to really, I mean, we can't comprehend it in a sense, but what this chambered nautilus is doing is that we outgrow, we maybe think that we've got the top because we can't see above it, and we think someone who's speaking from a more evolved state starts to feel that the person down here thinks they're just crazy, but we do this evolving, and we focus through on this. So the chambered nautilus, this is just one stanza of it. Oliver Wendell Holmes, Sr. Build thee more stately mansions, O my soul, as the swift seasons roll. Leave thy low vaulted past. Let each new temple, nobler than the last, shut thee from heaven with a dome more vast, till thou at length art free, leaving thine outgrown shell by life's unresting sea.
And maybe Bob and Gloria, just picking up on what you were just sharing, Gloria, about polarity and integration. And what I'm hearing in our time together this morning is that there's an absence of polarity. There's an integration of spirituality and religion. And in the U.S. and in the West, we're seeing an increasing number of people saying they're spiritual but not religious. We're seeing a decline in membership in many of the world religions. And I think about my when I was doing my graduate studies in China and Japan, and how, whether it was Taoism, Buddhism, Zen Buddhist in Japan, that was just part of the culture. And I'd love to hear you both maybe speak a bit more about how you hold spirituality, how you hold religion, and I'm just hearing that there's a lack of or absence of polarity in those two, and what you're speaking. I don't know if that's accurate, but would love to hear you both speak to that.
Well, let me just begin by saying, I believe that one of the things about coming together, both as a couple and as community, is that we help one another to grow. And I think that I'm blessed to have been married. My first wife of 51 years, Ruth, passed away 12 years ago. And I was fortunate with Ruth and with Gloria both to marry women who are more enlightened than I am, and therefore have helped me to grow, because through their greater understanding of those polarities have helped me to, has challenged me to try and expand the dimensions of my soul, my heart and mind. And I think in a way, this is again what religions help one another. That is, one could argue that no one can live all of the religions. I can't be both a faithful Buddhist and a faithful Catholic and a faithful Mormon. I don't have the capacity or the time to do that, but that God, by giving light to all of the traditions, helps to expand the light and helps to give us opportunities to grow outside ourselves. So I think that, again, Gloria made a quote to the prophet Joseph Smith, who said, by contraries is truth, by proving contraries is truth made manifest. It is when contraries come together that there is, and when another a scripture from the Book of Mormon says there must needs be opposition in all things. Without the pain, without there wouldn't be the joy. Without the sorrow, there wouldn't be the triumphant expression. And in those polarities, it seems to me, there is the invitation to evolve, to grow. Gloria, why don't you add whatever you would like to that?
One thought that's coming to mind that addresses what you were saying, Tom, is that I think we can get stuck in a silo or a channel and say spirituality is what I want, I don't need religion, and you don't start to recognize the contribution that they have for each other. Spirituality sometimes isn't found in religion, not the way you want it. I mean, it's there, but you don't, it becomes more of a function and a rote kind of thing to do, and you obey. But when you're able to bring them together, I think that's when you start serving, and serving is worship.
Yeah. Bob?
Kister Stendhal, the dean of the Harvard School of Religion and the former Lutheran bishop of Sweden, coined a term called holy envy. And by that, he meant that there are things in other religions that we see that we wish were our own. It's one of the things that I find in teaching at the Graduate Theological Union, is I would begin each semester by telling my students, who came from many different traditions, many of them studying for the ministry, about things that I envied in that I felt were beautiful and meaningful, and that was very sincere, because I find that richness and that textured in other faiths. And at the end of the semester, I would say, as you've now studied a semester studying in the theology and ecclesiology, is there anything about which you might have holy envy? Predictably, the things they find is that Latter-day Saints have an open canon, that is, believe in continuing revelation, but also believe in a heavenly mother. And I think there is something in all of us that wants the divine feminine, who sees and feels toward that. And so this the richness of listening to the hearts and minds of other believers and believers, and feeling toward them what we might be able to learn, is one of the ways we expand our own world of faith. Excuse me, Michael, you were about to ask me something.
One,
Perhaps.
no, I was just going to say that you've spoken before about the fact that you've had students through the years, especially younger students, would say to you like, "Well, I'm spiritual but not religious," and you were saying that's maybe a false dichotomy. I thought you want to say something about that.
Well, this is what I often say to them. When is the last time you heard of a group of spiritual people getting together to feed the poor? You can be both spiritual and religious. And I find myself, I find in our work in our local congregation, we've just spent a couple of years teaching the 7 and 8 years. And what a beautiful thing that is. They're right up knowing who they are and wondering about God, and just being able to spend them every Sunday has been really a glorious experience, and that allows spirituality to manifest itself in concrete ways. And so let's strive for both spirituality and religiosity, as long as we harmonize them. The problem is that sometimes religion becomes non-spiritual, and that's when perhaps people find it more difficult to stay. One of the things I would say about being part of a congregation is that you are often with with people that you might not normally choose to spend time with. But on those sacred occasions when you may be singing together, you may be praying together, you may be talking about service to the poor or the needy together, or doing something as we have done in the interfaith work here in Marin County. There is something about coming together to do that where the differences become really much less significant than the harmonies. So thank you for that question. And I'll just shift now to talk a little, because the thing we're talking about ultimately is love. And I think that it's in love that we most find God. Quantum physics, which fascinates me, even though I confess I don't really understand much about it, but quantum physics posits that on the most fundamental level, we are all connected, all part of a universal consciousness. Think about that. In a soon to be published study, The Lens of Love, Holographic Eye of the Universal Consciousness, our friend Raymond Bradley from New Zealand argues this. He says, our urgent quest must be to harness access to, and thus harvest guidance from, a realm of universal consciousness, a consciousness that is both inside and all around us, a consciousness enfolded into everything and is everywhere, a consciousness that is eternal and yet always now. It is a paradox that the thing that seems most unique to us, our individual consciousness, may be connected to everyone and everything in the universe. Bradley says, this is where love comes in. For the evidence shows love's resonant energy hates the channel of action. It is through love that we connect with one another. It's through love that we connect with God. It's through love that we connect to this mysterious thing called the universe. The two great commandments of Jesus actually include 3 objects of love. We are commanded to love others as ourselves and to love our neighbors and God. In other words, I think we can't really love God and love other people unless we have a healthy spiritual love for ourselves. René Descartes said famously, I think, therefore I am. My experience has led me to read Descartes, to turn his statement into one that I consider closer to the truth. I love God, others, and myself, and therefore I am. And I am loved, of God, others, and myself. And therefore, I will be. The writers of the general theory of love, quote, alters the structure of our brains. It alters us in many other ways besides, ways that expand and deepen who we are fundamentally. Ultimately, it seems more than anything, it is our capacity to love and return love that defines being, and it is in and through the multiple acts of loving in which we most ultimately, intimately, and truly find ourselves. And finding ourselves, find God, or finding God, finding ourselves. We don't, to do that, to find ourselves and God through love, we don't need philosophy or theology, just one another and God. Gloria, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. I think this search for reality that I had, it for me is that reality is mystery. It's change, it's progression, it's transfiguration, it's creation, it's lucid motivation to do things, it's softness at the heart of all things, and especially in my own heart. Because of my journey, I've come to know more and more who I truly am. And I can know it in humility and love and in holiness. I think about God saying to Moses, I am that I am. So tell others I am. And I think that is an important thing, is to truly be yourself. It doesn't take religion. I think it takes an inner godliness to comprehend who you truly are. It's not allowing anything. It's always there, that love, that wholeness, that completeness. It's opening to it. And guess that, I do want to say one other thing. What this isn't just John. I've talked with others who have studied adult development, and what they're finding is that when you are born, it's a lot like when you're up in those cosmic and non-dual realms, that you're born with some of the beauties that we aspire to. And we are uniquely personal, but we're universally divine, and that is part of who we are as babies. And it's what I've loved about being a mother, is to feel that universal divine that goes through all things. But also, I'm going to quote from Matthew 18, the first part of it, but I'm quoting from the Bible called The Message. At about the same time, the disciples came to Jesus asking, who gets the highest rank in God's kingdom? For an answer, Jesus called over a child whom he stood in the middle of the room and said, I'm telling you once and for all that unless you return to square one and start over like children, you're not even going to get to look at the kingdom, let alone get in. Whoever becomes simple and elemental again, like this child, will rank high in God's kingdom. What's more, when you receive the childlike on my account, it is the same as receiving me. And I think that's what I aspire to.
One of the things that I Michael, we've talked about is the work that Gloria and I, the interfaith work that we do here, we've done elsewhere, and we're doing in Marin County. Example of that yesterday, the members of the Interfaith Council had been responsible for furnishing an entire home of for veterans, number of different apartments, and just completely furnishing it up, or gathering food for the poor. I find often that impulse to learn from and join with other believers enriches my life. One of my most remarkable experiences happened in an Episcopal church in Pasadena a number of years ago. Because I was essentially a motherless child, I had always wanted what I was not able to get from my mother. The idea in our theology of having a heavenly mother was very beautiful to me. But my mother had been sexually abused as a child, and therefore was really broken in many ways, incapable of really being a mother. I was in this Episcopal church, Reverend Neely, I remember, 30 years ago. She was telling how they brought each week they brought in the homeless, and they laundered their clothing for them, and so that they could go back to were living on the streets, whatever. And as she was talking about that, she was talking about this work that we do for the homeless and poor and the minorities and all of those people that are considered other. And it occurred to me that as she was administering the Eucharist, she said that she addressed divinity as Mother or God. And as she did so, I had a very deep impression, an intuition that I hold sacred, that at that time, my own mother was being healed by our Heavenly Mother in that other realm that we will all go to someplace, sometime. And that within the sacred things that we share, there is beauty, there is holiness, there is a kind of way in which we evolve. I love Scott Peck and Scott Peck's thinking. He defines spiritual growth as the evolution of consciousness. He describes the movement from undeveloped spirituality to spiritual competence. And he speaks of this as spiritual evolution. He also says this evolution is entropic, and that the force that drives spiritual evolution is love. He says this: it is through love that we elevate ourselves, and it is through our love for others that we assist others to elevate themselves. Love, the extension of the self, is the very act of evolution. It is evolution in progress. The evolutionary force present in all of us manifests itself in humankind as human love. Among humanity, love is the miraculous force that defies the natural law of entropy. Peck states that love comes from grace. To explain the miracle of grace, we hypothesize the existence of a God who wants us to grow, a God who loves us. As Latter-day Saints who have read The Road Less Traveled, undoubtedly astonished to discover what Peck has to say about the ultimate end, spiritual evolution. I'm having to do this on my screen because my mouse stopped working. So anyway, I'm innovating here. Consistent with Latter-day Saint theology, Peck posits that the purpose of our mortal existence is to evolve toward godhood. Listen to what he says. Why does God want us to grow? What are we growing toward? Where is the end point? The goal of evolution. what is it that God wants of us? He then says, no matter which we may like to pussyfoot around it, all of us who postulate a loving God eventually come to a single terrifying idea. God wants us to become himself or herself itself. We are growing toward godhood. God is the goal of evolution. It is God who is the source of the evolutionary force, and it is God who is the destination. Reading those words 20 years ago, I had again that ring of truth that what God wants most to do is to share everything that God has with us if we can find ourselves capable of growing and evolving to the point where we can embrace everything that God is and everything that God means and everything that God does. And I believe that means embracing one another, including those people that Jesus speaks of in the 25th chapter of Matthew as other. As a Christian, I find that I fall short of what Christ calls me to in that 25th chapter of Matthew. You recall that this parable of the sheep and the goats, and there will people, the master will say, I was hungry and you fed me, and I was naked and you clothed me. I was thirsty and you gave me water. I was in prison and you visited me. And the people say, we don't remember doing that to you. And he says, inasmuch as you did it unto the least of these, or did it not unto the least of one of these. And in the Aramaic, it's beautiful because he said, if you've done unto the least of one of these, my little brothers or sisters, or inasmuch as you withheld love or nurture from one of these, my little brothers and sisters, it's the same as if you withheld it from me, which says that when we look at the trans child, we look at the alcoholic mother, we look at the person in prison. Gloria and I have been involved in the prison ministry at San Quentin. When you visit those people, Jesus says, it's me. And therefore, it seems to me the great call, whether we're Christians or Muslims or Jews, is to be able to see God in whomever it is that we encounter, in whatever circumstance that we encounter, to see ourselves too, to imagine ourselves in that place. The great miracle of Christianity is that Jesus imagined himself in every person in the world. Jesus imagined himself like you, like me, like everyone, universally imagining us as redeemable, universally imagining us as worthy of grace, which is kind of a contradiction because grace comes without our being worthy of it. But in this beautiful thing that we have of humanity, where we are learning to love ourselves and God and one another, we do that as we learn how to love, and learn how love transcends everything. Emerson said, everything I've seen causes me to trust God for everything that I haven't seen. There's so much of the world we can't make sense of, and God knows that we can't make sense of it. I don't think it makes sense to God. But out of that nonsense, we can begin to make sense. And we make sense most of all through the power of love. So, and however we do it, Michael, you've had some beautiful people on this program this week talking about ways in which they have used their understanding of love and of God to be in the world and to change the world. That's our calling, and it's mysterious and it's beautiful, but it is the place where I believe we find and make meaning. It is that middle, that mysterious, sometimes mundane middle, where all of us come together to find meaning and make meaning. So
Yeah,
thank you,
Bob.
Michael, for helping us all to move toward that place of meaning and its richness and its beauty. And its
Well, it's
glory.
beautiful. And I just want to say, it's like, there's no better example today than you and Gloria talking about it. The path is participatory and relational. It's very much what I've been hearing from you. And it's also developmental as well. And I think it's very beautiful. And one of the things I think I just was so moved by your testimony and your stories, especially Gloria, really just was like, I was just so deep. But what I hear is that this path is not a solo journey. And this path is, there's a tendency sometimes to fall into, we go from materialism to spiritual materialism, which is we try to make the spiritual path something we can sort of build and achieve and get status from. But the real ultimate understanding, as Peck was talking about, he said, love is furthering the growth of another. And that was his definition of love. And in this idea of working to do service across faiths, across spiritual traditions, that service is the ultimate way, I think, that we progress. It's not some kind of achievement for the self. It's not a spiritual materialism we capture, like a badge, an achievement. It's a participatory and relational process of uncovering and discovering wisdom, but also putting that wisdom into action. And I think that's what's so wonderful about you and Gloria and your work. And I know we've got a few minutes before I want to hear from Gloria about her closing thoughts, but also a little bit, you've been very modest talking about the work you've been doing with your foundations to help children, feeding children, the work you've done with nonprofits. It'd be good just say a little bit about that work before you go, and to hear Gloria before we leave. So thank you, Bob, very much.
Gloria, you want to say a word about Bountiful, and I'll say a word about FastForward for the Planet.
Yeah. So one of my joys is that my nutrition, and then this love of internationalism. And I meet Bob Rees, who has Bountiful Children's Foundation, and it's reaching 20 different countries, feeding children who are malnourished between the pre-birth, so the pregnant women and the nursing mothers, and then the children up to the age of 3, because that's when the mind is most vulnerable and needs that nutrition. And so for me to be able to combine that, the nutrition and the outreach has been a real joy. Holding these babies. And as probably my closing remarks were, talking about becoming as a little child again, that to hold those babies, their innocence, and know what happens in this world that takes us away from that, but that we will refine back into that sweetness as we fall into the arms of God. And Bob, fast forward.
Let me just say that one of the amazing things in the Bountiful Children's Foundation, we're in 200 communities in 20 countries, that we can provide the nutritional supplements for a child for an entire year for $100. That's just amazing how little it takes to do something significant as helping a child. FastForward for the Planet is our newest nonprofit, and we've decided not to be too ambitious to take on saving the planet, but what the heck. So the idea is that through fasting. People can contribute money, so it doesn't cost them anything to help save the planet. And right now we're focusing on saving the lake in Utah. It is the largest inland sea in the Western Hemisphere, the Salt Sea, and it's been shrinking for years, and it is in danger of being lost. And it's the home for 340 kinds of birds and all kinds of other creatures. So we're focusing on seeing if we can lake by inviting all of the people who live in proximity to it to give a modest contribution of $10 a month to save that. We believe that it's possible to save the planet, but it also is going to take all of us working together. And as Robinson Jeffers says, it's only a little planet, but how beautiful it is. So it's fun, it's rewarding, it's the work that I think we are all called to do, to help one another at God's work. And so there are multiple ways to do that. And fortunately, there are many, many people, including so many of you listening in today, who found ways to give and serve and to magnify love. And so we thank you for that and for all of the things that you do. And again, thank you, Michael, for this opportunity.
I just wanted to ask you both a final thought. Bob, you mentioned earlier about the opportunity, my words, the opportunity of life is to evolve our spirituality, evolve our consciousness. And with the meaning-making crisis that we're seeing, particularly in youth, where we're seeing extraordinary levels of anxiety, depression, suicide. And if that is the purpose of life, to evolve our consciousness, to evolve our spirituality, how do our youth in particular, but each of us as adults, embrace the evolution of our spirituality and our consciousness and live our life from that place, as opposed to so much of what's part of our society here in the West, especially around consumption, around consumerism, around material things, and our identity as what we do professionally and how much money we have in our bank account, etc. How do we reconcile that, and how do we help youth in particular shift their consciousness about the meaning of their lives?
Such a profound and important question. I feel humble to even say anything, but I come back to, for me, it is, and so Gloria and I have 19 grandchildren between us, and so we are very much aware of this crisis of faith in this younger generation. And it is a failure of our generation that has allowed these conditions to erode confidence. But I would say that any opportunity we have to help people feel loved, help people feel understood, give them hope. Faulkner talks about in his Nobel acceptance speech, the eternal verities, these truths that we know within our bones of love and kindness and grace and goodness and generosity. And wherever we are, make possible the multiplication and the deepening of those kinds of experiences so that people can learn to love themselves. As I say, I think that self-love, self-love can be a sickness, but healthy self-love is essential for functioning in the world. And if we can help young people to understand that, and that by going outside of themselves, by getting out of their social media prisons, as it were, into service, doing things that focus on others, whether it's something relating to the poor or the needy or the LGBT community, any group of individuals who feel marginalized, who feel dispirited. If you do give a little bit of time to service, give a little bit of money to help somebody somewhere, those things become important and grow within us because we realize that they really work, that there is so beautiful in who we are. And but it's a huge task, but it's something that belongs to all of us.
Yeah, thank you, Gloria.
I think I would add to that there's so much beauty in not knowing, and to listen and to absorb and to not walk through life like we've got the answers, because we need that searching and that curiosity that will open up to us what's already there. We just can't see it because we think we know it. I think we listen to others and we feel the vibrant cohesion. And when we've got that, then we can talk about other things and about our differences and see that those differences actually feed into each other for strengths.
Well, I think I have something.
I think the very thing we're doing here, Michael, is to have conversations about, is to listen to one another, to our hearts. So again, thank you both for hosting this week, and for Jim and Humanity Rising for continuing these opportunities to have such meaningful dialogue.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Gloria. And I just want to say that before we say thank you for this week and for you providing such a beautiful capstone to the week, is that in your question, Tom, I think implicit in it is there is so much mystery there in the path, but people need to. There used to be the old certainties in the pre-modern view of things. It was very hierarchical, very certain, very stable. Now, I think there's so many there's so many things we need to address, but I would say one thing we need is for older generations of people to regain the confidence in a new way. We had a confidence 100 years ago. We were certain and maybe stubborn and wrong, but we had certainty and confidence, even though it may not have been well earned and it may have been faulty. There was a confidence. And I think the challenge is there was a confidence instead of a black and white propositional thinking. Sort of, we talked this week about the fact that the West was really great about propositions, not so great in participatory. Jim said we should go back to the wisdom of the indigenous people, because there was this very embodied sense of eternal wisdom that was lived out in participation. And if you were part of an indigenous community, you had confidence that there was an unbroken intergenerational truth that you could participate in. And what we've done in the West, we may have had some false certainties, but we had certainties. There was a confidence of an intergenerational transmission. And the last 60, 70, after World War II, there's been a lot of change and a lot of chaos. And I would say a loss of confidence. And maybe people would say a well-earned loss of confidence because of all the things our certainties did to oppress and leave out people, right? Christ would not have appreciated, Christ wasn't trying to teach, but Christianity ended up doing, right? Leaving out a lot of people. The challenge is that in a time of a meta crisis, when we have a meaning crisis, because we've lost the certainties from before. And so we don't have a certainties in a set of propositions. But I think what Bob and Gloria are doing here is they found a new set of confidence in this unfolding evolutionary path. And so in some ways, the confidence is not in a fixed set of propositions and a fixed set of truths, but that journey is taking us somewhere that we can have confidence in. So no matter where I am or someone else is on their journey, there's a sense of this isn't it. There is more available to me. There is more to unfold. Maybe I'm in a difficult spot. There's hope, but there's also hope for my culture. There's hope that we've gone through modernism and postmodernism. There's something beyond that. There's a journey, and that no matter where I'm at, there's more to grow. There's more available to me, and that the people who are our elders, like we have here, and wisdom holders like Bob and Gloria, are showing us that there is the light, the evolutionary light. There is a confidence that can be had in this journey, in this process. That's where the confidence comes from, not from a fixed set of propositions, not from a fixed set of knowing God, but the confidence that it's continuously unfolding, that there's more available, and that perhaps that more available will actually be what we need to meet the meta crisis. So that's what I sort of think is how the whole week came together, Bob. It's very beautiful what you and Gloria have done. And I want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bob, Gloria, thank you both for being with us today. Michael, it's been a joy putting this week together with you and being along for the ride. We want to thank you all for being with us this week. And Jim will be returning on Monday for another week of programming on Humanity Rising. So thanks again for joining us. And please join us again on Monday.
Thank you.